Welcome to Alice Down the Rabbit Hole, my new podcast. I've been meaning to sit down and film this podcast for a good month and I have not got around to it. Today is the day. First off, I'm going to start talking about why I actually decided to start a podcast. I've always wanted to make a platform which I can be way more relatable and way more connected to the people that have followed me along the journey that I have had, just to chat about topics that make people feel a little bit less alone. So if you've never seen my face before, when I was 19, I'm now 22, I got a very severe eating disorder, which I was already posting on TikTok at the time, and it was actually people in my comments being like, girl, you need to get help. That prompted me to see that I actually had a problem. And then I went through the journey of recovery online. Difficult because I wasn't a recovery account, but because of people knowing that, I had struggled in the past, that was kind of difficult to navigate. I think I kind of built this community of people that genuinely did want to get better from this mental health or any other mental health illness that they were trying to recover from and actually give life another go. My first thing I actually wanted to talk about was the pipeline of growing up and going to an all-girls school and dealing with severe body issues, which I think so many people can relate to anyway, just having body dysmorphia or just always having to live up to this certain standard of having a body that is worthy or whatever the hell. So I grew up in Bournemouth, which is a seaside town, and I went to a girls' grammar school there, and it was the only girls' grammar school in Bournemouth, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on that. So I rock up to this all-girls high school, a little bit chubby, I'm gonna be honest, but what 11-year-old isn't a little bit chubby? I wasn't overweight, I had puppy fat like every other child does. I had no qualms about the way that I looked. I didn't really care that I had a little bit of extra insulation until probably about year 8, and then people started talking about working out and guys, we should go to, at lunchtime, we should go and do a workout session. It was really toxic things like that were always said, or someone was saying, oh, I didn't bring my lunch in today. I'm just I'm doing a 1 meal a day situation. And as a year 8, so what are you, 13, 14? To hear that kind of thing being thrown around like it was nothing, my brain was like, yeah, so that's normal to only eat 1 meal a day. That's fine, I'll do that. It just was a constant kind of narrative at an all-girls school that it's better to just not eat, and this constant desire to look a certain way. And it just progressively got worse, to be honest, as I grew up and went through the school and people started being interested in the guys, and the guys would like it if you had the right figure. I don't know. That kind of prompted me to become even more obsessed with the way that I looked, and then even more obsessed into looking into even what a calorie is. Because before about year 9, I didn't know what a calorie was. I didn't care what a calorie was because my friends were watching what they were eating or only eating low calorie, low carb stuff. I was like, maybe I should get involved in this. The specific school that I went to, but I feel like a lot of schools have this, there were a lot of girls that ended up suffering with an eating disorder that were quite close to me as well. In my year, in my class, there were a lot of people that went through that sort of situation. So it was constantly, we were seeing these people get progressively iller until, they were taken out of school for a little bit. And I think it kind of almost normalized the whole getting severely ill thing, for me anyway. I didn't think it was that bad. If the angle keeps changing, it's because my camera keeps dying and I have to keep charging it up. But I know that if I just film this another time, I'm never gonna film it. So I just keep going to and from. I don't really blame myself for falling into that trap. I think it was really an easy thing to do. It was around 6th form, I would say, where things started taking a little bit more of a turn for the worst. Then when I left and went to uni, I just turned 19, I went to uni for the first time, and you know, you're cooking for the first time yourself, it was actually COVID as well when I went to uni, and it went downhill, and I ended up getting diagnosed with anorexia at 19 and having to go through a lot of treatment. I'm gonna do a proper full podcast on, I guess, dealing with an eating disorder and the entire story all the way through of what that looked like and what my recovery looked like. But I don't think that's gonna be something that I'm gonna really delve into in this episode, because this is, you know, this is the first one. I feel like we need to leave a little bit of the crazy for a couple episodes down the line. At the beginning, I didn't realize that I was even doing anything disordered, because I had this like mixed view of it from going to this grammar school, that I thought what I was doing was super normal when it wasn't. Fast forward to now. I'm now 22 and I live in London. I don't live in Bournemouth anymore, and I'm probably the happiest that I've ever been. I eat super intuitively. I eat whatever I want whenever I want. I'm not super restrictive. I can eat socially. I live by myself. Well, I live with my housemate, but like I don't live with my parents. Like they're not watching what I eat every single day to make sure that I'm eating it. And I can genuinely say that I'm the happiest that I've ever been. Is why I also kind of wanted to start this podcast, because I know that there are so many people out there that are maybe in the same position as me and post recovering from something, and are just trying to navigate how that looks in an everyday scenario. But also I'm assuming there are a lot of people that are going through what I had gone through a few years back, and maybe if I even change one of your minds, that life looks so much better when you're not worrying so much about what you look like and counting every single calorie that you put in your body. And I'm gonna share that life with you guys as well. This could be my opportunity to actually just share what's going on in my life. I kind of wanted to do a proper topic for the first episode, and it's gonna be a little mini episode, this one, because it is more of an introductory thing. But what I mentioned earlier was me moving from Bournemouth to London, so I thought it would be a great segue to take us into talking about my experience of moving out for the first time, because I think a lot of the time people don't realize that that is one of the biggest jumps. And for me, actually, it was when I moved to London was actually the second time I'd moved out, because I went to Bath Uni for 6 weeks when I was 18/19. Obviously that didn't end so well. That ended with me getting taken out and brought, you know, back, because a bit cuckoo at that timing. But I think the accumulation of moving out, actually that whole like adjustment period was so difficult to do. But I've got some advice, I guess, on how to actually move out successfully, because then years later, when I was 21, when I moved to London, and that went so successfully. So people underestimate that transition period, that moving out, and I think a lot of the time it's people going to uni and moving into halls. Halls is quite literally my idea of hell, and I was in halls for 6 weeks. But the difference from having your mum or your dad or whoever cares for you probably doing quite a lot for you that you don't even realize, even if you had chores at home and you like cooked sometimes, cooking every single day for yourself and actually just like taking care of yourself on an everyday basis, cleaning, doing all these little things, so much more difficult than you think it's gonna be, especially if you are at uni and you're doing like a course as well. Also, I think the social aspect of living with your family is when you come back to your home, you don't necessarily have to sit down and talk for ages, or sit down and put on your social battery, because you come back home and you're with your family, and you can just be, you could sit there in silence and everyone would just be like, yeah, like we don't need to speak. But when you move out and you transition, whether you're living with a housemate that you haven't lived before with, you know, or a couple housemates, or if you're at uni, because most people do not move in on your own, I think if you're not as familiar with someone on that everyday basis, it's quite difficult. You have to come home and you have to talk to people and you have to keep up the social battery, and it's tiring. You're supposed to be able to relax in your own home, but it actually becomes more of like an anxious thing. And I think it's a difficult mix to kind of comprehend of like where do I draw the line of like not wanting someone to come into my room, or kind of just like experiencing all of those little things, especially in uni, because I remember from my personal experience when I was at Bath Uni, and I was living in the quads, big up Bath Uni quads if anyone is in them right now. The actual room is tiny in the quads. Like I'm talking like Harry Potter under the stairs type of vibe. It's bloody tiny in those rooms. So you're encouraged to like go out into the social areas, right? But when you first move into uni, you don't really want to, you know, sit there and be chatting all the time and like doing your work, and someone comes in and like starts asking about your day. You're like, oh my god, I just want to chill. But chilling in the tiny rooms, which most uni rooms are quite small, and most uni rooms are also dingy and dark and depressing. So you do kind of want to get out, but then you feel like stressed to get out. I remember this is probably also because I struggled with eating at this time. I like wouldn't want to go into the kitchen and cook if anyone else was even in the kitchen. So that created a whole issue, because it meant that like I was just like, I'd walk into the kitchen, someone would be there, I'd be like, oh, well, don't want to be here anymore, I'm going back to my room. It's so easy to fall into bad patterns, and I know a lot of people after first term of uni, they end up getting quite like sad, and some people get depression. And I think the best thing to remember with that transition period is that it's not always gonna be filled with joyous things. You know, you might think before you do it, oh, I'm finally gonna have my freedom from my family, like from my mum, my dad, I can do whatever I want. But you know, it's not always gonna be a completely like uphill trajectory, and it's okay that it's not, and it's okay to feel exactly how you're feeling. You shouldn't feel like disappointed or like your expectations weren't met. The thing is, the real treat of it is once you've lived alone for, I would say, around 6 months to almost a year, that pressure and that sense of not really knowing what you're doing, and that maybe a little bit of sadness that you fall into does completely go. And then it will switch like a switch. You'll go back home for a summer and you'll be like, oh, I don't belong here anymore. I actually want to get back to living my own life, to living all of the things I'm doing, because you will have finally figured it out. As much as it's annoying to someone to say like, you'll figure it out, but just make sure that you're taking time for yourself. And one thing I would say, if you are at uni, don't just sit in your room. Like, get outside, go on a walk. You know what? The outside, listening to a good old podcast, you don't know what that can do for you. And it could even be my podcast. Any people that are currently struggling with that transition, my main advice would be that you're not the only one thinking all these things. You know, I think before you go to uni specifically, you think it's going to be this insane experience, but then you get there and sometimes there's pressures and things that you didn't quite realize were going to be pressures, and sometimes a lot of people can fall into a bit of a depression, and it does get better. It really does. Also, my advice would be, you don't have to stay in a situation that's making you really, really sad. Like, go back home, get some more clarity on the situation, and if it's genuinely, maybe the uni is not right for you, maybe the place isn't right for you, and if it's genuinely just the accommodation, there is always something that accommodation experts can do. But you know, I went completely crazy insane, so if you've stuck it out, well done. I think also it's good to talk to the people that you're also surrounding yourself with. You know, they might also, I've just said also 3 times in the shortest space of time. The people that you live with will potentially be going through the exact same thing as you, because it's really, really common to have a little bit of space where you think you're lost. And knowing that you're not the only person going through it is actually so relieving. I think I'm probably gonna just wrap up the episode there, because I wanted it to be a little mini episode and just a taste of what to come. Please let me know what topics you'd like me to discuss. If anyone's having any specific issues at the moment and you want to get my perspective on it, or if you have any questions, like dating advice, whatever, it's all going to be coming in the future. I just thought I would start off by a little bit of an introduction and a mini rant, I guess, because I know that that's something that people have brought up to me before, so I thought better give you a little insight. There's a family that lives below me and he's just started crying, one of the little boys, and I feel like you will be able to hear it in this podcast, so I'm gonna wrap it up there. So if you hear a crying child, it's not mine. It's not mine. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little podcasty style video. I think we're going to be calling the podcast style videos Alice Down the Rabbit Hole, a little pun on the Alice in Wonderland situation. I really hope you enjoyed this, and tune in to the next one. Depending on what you guys want, leave it in the comments what you want. Where I can delve into anything that you guys have particularly requested in the comments. Bye bye.